Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you are enjoying your
recording in.
Hello. I will mute everyone for the moment so that I can make my little speech here. Hello, everyone. More people are coming in. Okay, I think we get started. I would like to wish you a warm welcome to our webinar. The title of today's event is What is an Enterprise Taxonomy and How You Build It. So we will talk about the different kinds of taxonomies. We will talk about how actually these taxonomies are comprised, how they relate to each other, and also what is the best strategy to build your own enterprise taxonomy. Obviously, all in the context of products. Whoever is not familiar with our webinar series, again, I would like to extend you a warm welcome. And everyone who already had the joy to be with us, also welcome back. My name is Dirk Grunewald, and I am the CEO of Digital Consulting House. Digital Consulting House has one main focus of business, and that is master data management, in particular product information management. And as such, obviously, we deal a lot with taxonomies. Also, would like to mention here that this meeting is being recorded, simply also for the purpose to give you something you can go back to, because we will distribute some of these recordings also to the participants. But also, we might use some of it with actually making sure that individual people are not being recognizable. We might also use that for marketing purposes. By no means we will use any of the contact information here without your consent, right? So everyone hates spammers, and we do too. So having said that, let me go into the agenda. Right, what are we going to talk about? First of all, we'll provide a very brief introduction of our company, of what we are doing, and then we will jump right into the question. First of all, what is product information management, and why do you do it, and what are the benefits? And then I will hand over to my colleague, Mr. Thomas Gottweis, to explain the subject of taxonomy. Right? That will take us hopefully around 15 to 20 minutes, so that we have ample time for questions and answers. Okay, so I jump right into the first subject, and that is, who are we? So Digital Consulting House was started 2013 after I left a company called Hyla. Hyla was at that time the leading vendor of product information management software. Well, they were always competing against other companies like Stibo, for instance. And 2013, Informatica took over, and I decided to start my own business. Over time, we were growing. 2015, we started an entity in Germany, but our team is has now extended to different locations within North America, Germany, and also India and Mexico. I will introduce the core team members in the following slide. So, well, apart from myself, again, Dirk Grunewald, we have Mr. Thomas Gottweis. He's the president and a partner of Digital Consulting House. We have Mr. Wesselburg, whose main focus is on the subject of publication, also automation of print and electronic catalogs, and Mr. Sumit Rai, who leads our sales and marketing. There are several other people behind this group who are supporting us with our services. And as I mentioned, these are predominantly all around PIM and MDM, advisory, implementation, publications, as I mentioned, electronic and also print publications, and also the integrations around it. So subjects like ETL, Informatica Power Center, Kafka, Talent, to name a few technologies, are not foreign to us. Also, well, otherwise we wouldn't provide this webinar here. Also, taxonomy, stewardship, taxonomy strategy, taxonomy maintenance. These are subjects where we help with. In our days, obviously, also have started to get into data science, into artificial intelligence. And we also train organizations on best practices, but also on the individual tools. So I mentioned Enterprise PIM, like Informatica or Stibo. We also partner with companies like SalesLayer and Jasper, right? So, and we are working exclusively with our own resource, with our own people, who all have a long-term experience in what they are doing, right? In particular, Mr. Gottweis and I have extensive experience in manufacturing, distribution, electrical industry, so subjects like ETIM, BME CAT, IDEA, all of this, that's our daily bread, right? And hence, we feel competent that we can tell you today a little bit more about these subjects. So let me go right into what is product information management. And you will find this also on our website and our LinkedIn presence and so on. This picture I use quite a lot, and other companies use that same kind of picture, and it shows a principle. So you have data coming from multiple data sources, right? And they might exist in all shape or form, and it might be very, very hard to manage them, to bring an order into them, to classify them, and to bring them into a shape that you can publish your product with all the relevant information. And that is what product information management shall help with, right? So I use the definition. There are multiple definitions, but I use a definition from Techopedia, what product information management is. So these are all the processes. So it's not the tool, it's not the software, right? But it's really like the processes which are used to evaluate, identify, store, manage, and distribute product data and information, right? And product information management, which is first of all a practice, which also involves organizational change. If you are not already doing that, that is a practice which helps you to get your product information into shape, to standardize, to classify, to enrich the data, so that you are able to publish into all of these channels, right? And it's not a purpose by itself. You do that because you want to do some good for your business. So what are you hoping, or what you expect to get when you do this, right? You want a faster time to market, right? You want also, because you have better information, higher conversion rates. This leads to higher revenue and higher margins, and at the end, a better bottom line. So that's what it's all about. That's why we are doing this. And that's the purpose of our business. Okay, having said that, I would like to hand over to Mr. Gottweis, taking you to the main event, taxonomy. Tom, you are still muted.
Yeah, I just discovered that. Hopefully I'm a little bit more audible now. Appreciate the opportunity to share some information about taxonomies and enterprise taxonomies with everyone today. So let's get, if we could have the next slide, please. Talk a little bit about just what a taxonomy is, right? And essentially it is basically just a way of grouping things together, making smaller groups of things out of a large collection of things to simplify how you deal with them, how you work with them. And in this case, a thing can be pretty much anything. Concepts or ideas are perfectly valid things to include in a taxonomy. For the purposes of what we're going to be talking about today, and more going to be physical objects, and more specifically, the products that you sell. So generally, taxonomies are hierarchical in structure, but not always. There are network taxonomies as well. There's not used nearly as much. And so let's talk a little bit about the management of these collections of things. If I could get the next slide, please. This would be a great example of a hierarchical taxonomy. Essentially, it is how, in fact, we name the relationships that we have with all of the various different members of our extended family. So this I actually pulled off an interesting genealogy site, and is essentially a nice example of how we have concepts as the things that we classify in the taxonomy. So next slide, please. When we talk about an enterprise taxonomy, there's basically a few different kinds of things that we look at, right? So sometimes we have organizational hierarchies. There's the standard org chart, which we have an example of in the picture here. Sometimes we have component hierarchies. That includes things like bills of material. And when we determine what it is that we need all of the components to assemble a product that you're going to manufacture. Sometimes that just is a list of all the things that goes in a bag if you're putting together kits of things to sell. Right at the bottom here, we have an example of a product taxonomy, right, where we have clothing. So we can begin with the top level saying these are men's or women's apparel. And there we say pants or shirts. And, we can further subdivide that, and we'll go into a little bit about how that subdivision process works in a little bit of time. If we could have the next slide, please. So when we're talking about enterprise taxonomies, we can actually define those almost in a taxonomy. There's really three different kinds that I like to think about. And the first kind of enterprise taxonomy is informational. So there we keep all of the information about the items that you sell, or in some cases the services that you sell in the businesses that you run. Sometimes it's referred to as a maintenance hierarchy because that's where you maintain the data for the items that you sell. And generally, they call that an enterprise taxonomy just because mostly that's done by larger businesses, although not always, in order to help really corral the large collections, the large assortments of items that retail and distribution businesses have to manage. Then from there, we've got navigational hierarchies, and that really defines how a customer is going to find your products. So historically, that has been sort of in an index or a glossary to the big thick catalogs that have been produced, and which Mr. Vesselberg still produces. These days, it really informs your website. It determines how your customers are going to navigate through the various different pages on your website, and how the customers search for a particular item on your website, either by navigation or by doing a search based on keywords. And so there really is some interplay, because generally those keywords would be a particular attribute of a particular category in your informational taxonomy, and that would inform how you build your navigational taxonomy. And lastly, we're not going to talk about this one too much here, but there's reporting taxonomies as well, and that really defines how your products contribute to the overall profitability of your organization. Contribution margin is sometimes included in something like that, and also who's responsible for the management of those products, right? Most large distributorships or retail organizations have a product or category managers, or sometimes both. And these are generally maintained more in your ERP system than in a product information management system. So we're not going to really talk about that too much, but that could be a topic of a future webinar. So if we can get the next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about what it is we're going to store in that taxonomy, right? So there's a couple of different kinds of data that we keep track of for products. And one type of data is essentially common to all of the various different items that an organization would carry in an assortment of items that they've got. So these are generally general in nature, things that apply to everything. So color, weight, dimensions, prices. The things that really we concern about ourselves about in an enterprise taxonomy are the category specific data elements. And there we actually are going to have a different set of data elements based on just exactly what the item is. And so that's why we have it highlighted in the bullet point here, right? That in an informational taxonomy, that really defines what a product is. And as we go and increasingly subdivide various different levels, we often refer to it as an is-a relationship. So we have a look at our half-inch copper pipe elbow pipe fitting there. And, you know, we say the half-inch copper elbow is a pipe fitting, is a plumbing product, for instance. And so there you would have three different levels of a taxonomy where that particular item would live. And often the lower that you go in a hierarchy, the more specific the data is going to become. But lower levels will often inherit data elements from the higher levels of the taxonomy, because you're going from the higher levels, which are more generalized, that are going to have data elements that apply to everything. So as you go down, the applies to everything data still applies to the more specific level of information as well. Next slide, please. Cool. So now we have a look a little bit at the navigational taxonomy. And essentially that's important because, well, ultimately, if a customer cannot find your product, they cannot buy your product. And for most businesses, that's what your organization exists to do, is to sell your products to your customers. One of the differences between the informational taxonomy and a navigational one is generally in an informational taxonomy, a product is only going to exist in one category because it satisfies this is a relationship. In a navigational taxonomy, often it makes sense to have items classified in several different categories. So if you're having a look, say in a retail electronic business, you might sell cameras, you might sell portable radios, and in many cases, right, the batteries are going to be the same. And so you're going to have batteries for cameras and you're going to have batteries for your portable audio equipment. They'll be the same batteries, right? But you want to have them in both categories because that facilitates the sale of those items to your customers. Categories in a navigational taxonomy, the attributes there are likely to become the actual facets that you use to do faceted navigation on your website. So if you have a look at almost all websites these days, they've got these a list of facets generally in the left-hand navigation, where once you've searched for something and you get a long list of search results, you can then filter those search results based on the facets. And so that's why it's very important to build that information out as you're building your navigational taxonomy. As we've mentioned before, these categories are going to have keywords. That's particularly useful for having external search engines able to find your particular product. And very often companies do search engine optimization by purchasing specific keywords that they're going to associate their products with, and so that you appear higher on the search results. And as we've said, as a best practice, it's very often the navigational hierarchy is being fed by the informational taxonomy. Next slide, please. Okay, so a word about how you get a taxonomy, right? There's really two different ways, either build it or buy it. There are a number of different ways that you can go and acquire a taxonomy. There are outfits out there like Wand and others as well. Wand was just the first one that came to mind, that actually create enterprise taxonomies for a fee. Then there are standardized taxonomies like ETIM or eClass or UNSBSC or NAICS, which are various different national and international systems to actually classify larger groups of products. So clearly, this is something that can save time as you're looking to apply an enterprise taxonomy to your business. But it can also be expensive to acquire, and it's still going to require some configuration and some ongoing maintenance. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So we've decided perhaps we don't want to go out and buy a taxonomy, but how do we build one? So if we can go to the next slide, thank you. So in my experience, there's a few things that you need to do in order to undertake that process. The first thing is to organize a team of people in your organization. Usually that's led by an information management professional. Very often you've got multiple subject matter experts that are going to be providing input to that process. Generally that consists of product or product line managers or both, as well as in a manufacturing setting, the engineers who are creating those products. Be prepared to put in some time. A lot of assortments can be, 500,000 items, sometimes millions of items in larger distribution businesses. And one organization, for example, that I was involved with, we had about 500,000 items in active items in the assortment, and that yielded about 2,500 separate categories that we needed to define. And clearly, utilizing a capable tool set in order to do that is a real benefit. This is particularly when you've got larger collections of items. Excel spreadsheets just aren't going to do it for you. Next slide, please. So, what are some things that are going to help ensure the success of that kind of an undertaking? Well, generally, it has been, in my experience, easier to start from the top, so less specific data, and then iteratively subdivide the categories as you work down to more specific levels of information. And stop subdividing when you have a category that's got perhaps some tens of items in it. So a category that has just one item is useless, right? That doesn't really do anything to simplify the process. You've actually just added some complexity to the system there. A category with thousands of items usually is too generic. Think perhaps of a pick list where you're looking for one item in a list of 1,000. You probably don't want to be scrolling through 1,000 items. And it's the same thing when you're creating a taxonomy. So generally tens to low hundreds of items are useful because that's also just about the number of items that you need to have sufficient data to train auto classifiers and AI systems that are there today to help with the process of classifying your collection of items once you've got the taxonomy built. So as you're going about doing this for each category, remember to define the category specific attributes that we talked about a little bit earlier. Essentially, those are all of the data elements that are going to be common to that particular category. They're likely to become the facets of your navigational taxonomy. And also then for each one of those attributes, take care to define the list of values that each of those attributes can have. If you don't do that as you're defining your taxonomy, you're going to spend an awful lot of time later on doing data cleansing, which is great for us because we do that too. But today we're here to try and give you pointers on how your exercise in creating a taxonomy can be most successful. So I would absolutely encourage very highly that as you're defining the attributes of a particular category, define the list of values that those attributes can have. And not only will your website creation people be happy, your data warehousing people will be grateful for what you're doing as well. But also make sure that things like units of measure, define those for all numerical values. Just to name a particular attribute and say it has a value of 5. That doesn't tell you as much as to say that the attribute has a value of 5 kilograms, for instance. And finally, I have found it most successful if you first go and build out your informational taxonomy, define what your products are, and then map those categories to your navigational taxonomy. And there are some tools out there that actually can help you do that. They have features that allow that to be facilitated. So next slide, please.
Yeah.
So that is the extent of the information that I had prepared to share. At this point in time, I would love to open the floor to questions if anybody has anything of interest that I may not have covered that they'd like to hear about.
Okay, feel free to raise your hands if you would have a question. Or just unmute yourself and ask directly.
I can't believe I did that good of a job. Surely there's someone out there that has something I haven't covered.
Does anyone have any questions or any comments? Any thoughts?
That's true. I do accept creative feedback, sometimes even constructive feedback.
So we have a couple of people we know. Carl, maybe you do not mind.
Well, let's see. We have a question here from WW.
WW. There is one. Okay. What type of, wait 1 second. What type of governance team would you put in place to develop and implement and sustain the taxonomy? That's a great question.
Indeed. And so larger organizations have formal data governance councils where they might actually, that they would sponsor a smaller team of people that would be responsible for maintaining the enterprise taxonomy. Usually in small to mid-sized organizations, that really consists of somebody in IT who has been blessed with the job of actually doing that, of creating the taxonomy, working together with product and product line managers to really get their subject matter expertise for the individual product lines that they have responsibility to maintain.
Okay, we have another question. What are the most commonly used tools out there which can be used for taxonomy?
That's an excellent question too. So there's generally 2 classes of systems that I've run into that are commonly used. For manufacturing, it's product lifecycle management systems, things like Windchill, for instance, right?
Yeah.
That are used to actually do product development for manufacturers, and that's where many of the characteristics of a product are sort of gathered together as the product development work is done. For organizations that are more distributorships or retail businesses, their successful businesses employ product information management systems. And there's a number of vendors out there that can help with that: Informatica, Stevo, Jasper, SalesLayer. And these are all organizations that Digital Consulting House has worked with and continue to work with, and can provide expertise on should that be required.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, if there's not one direct, here, more questions. Mr. Eric's one. How do I define the need of a taxonomy system for a small, mid-size manufacturing and distribution company?
Well, that largely depends on the number of products that you're manufacturing and distributing. Based on the nature of the question, I can already see the first level of the taxonomy, right? And that's going to be the products you manufacture versus the products that you buy and then distribute. And so there, if you have more than, say, a handful, once you're looking at perhaps a dozen to several dozen products, then it becomes useful, particularly if you have a website, to enable your customers to navigate quickly to that website, and also have sufficient, have a place where you can house the information for these products, right? One of the things that a website needs to have, right, is that once you've been fortunate enough to have a customer come and go to your website and want to buy from you, you need to provide them with enough information about the products that you have in order to have an informed purchase decision made by that customer, preferably to buy it from you, right? And so you need to have enough data to make a really compelling argument as to why they should be buying from your firm versus buying from a different supplier. And generally, that information is most easily stored and syndicated using a product information management system. And one of the key components of all of those are a taxonomy that helps to manage that information.
Yeah, this is a great one. And I think this question goes to you, Chris, right? What are the differences in taxonomy, if any, between the different channels in a multi-channel solution? For example, online catalog versus printed catalog. Chris, you want to answer that? I think that goes into your turn.
I was actually posting that question.
Okay.
No, I was actually posting that question. I was actually posting that question because I might think that that could be interesting to see if, for example, in a multi-channel solution where you feed web-based catalogs and so on, and printed catalogs, if you can reuse the taxonomy that is once defined for your product assortment, just as a given for any of those channels. The question that I asked, the online catalog and the printed catalog, they are so close together that I would assume that you can, without real big alterations, reuse that taxonomy. But there might be, and that question goes then to to you. There might be other examples where you have to adapt the taxonomy, right?
Well, indeed. And one of the things that comes directly to mind, right, is that you cannot do faceted navigation in a printed catalog.
Yeah, that's right.
You're constrained by how particularly good your index is, and a lot of the catalogs that I've seen have really quite extensive indices in the back that that help someone navigate in the book, right, to the page and to the actual section that they need to go to find that particular item that they're looking for.
Okay, then we have the next one. When building a taxonomy in a PLM system, is then a layer on top of the BOM, bill of material, or is it a totally separated structure? So let me try that, because I right now have a project with a customer where we actually have to do taxonomy in a PLM system and also bill of materials. So, and actually I do have a picture for that, but I don't have it here, but I will try my best to describe it here. So the taxonomy is universal for all parts. And if you go into a PLM system, you will find the same kind of structure which Tom outlined here. You have your tree, you have your definitions of the attributes and the value lists and the unit of measures for numerical values, right? All of that is the same. The thing is, when you are creating a product, or when you have a product which is classified, it will have its attributes, but it also has a bill of materials, either the EBOM or the engineering bill of materials, which, as you saw with the example of the bicycle, tells you how that bicycle is being composed, right? So, but also there is a manufacturing bill of material, which tells you, okay, what are the components I need to build that product, right? For instance, if you have a plastic part which has a cover, which is a plastic, right? So for the engineering, it's that cover. But for the manufacturing, it's maybe the granulate of the plastic material which you put through the injection molding. So that's a little bit different. But all of these parts of the BOM are being classified as well, right? And typically they exist as parts of their own right, and they might sit somewhere else in the taxonomy, right? And some of these bill of materials, they go quite deep as well. But
Sure.
you typically don't create a separate structure for that. It's just one taxonomy for everything. And depending on how you classify it, like the whole product, down to the last nut and bolt, right? You get, for each of these components of that bill of materials, you also get the attributes.
Yeah, if you've got a relatively complex product that you're manufacturing, generally some portion of your firm's income is going to be dependent upon replacement spares, particularly if it's not a disposable product, right? If it's something that has some lifespan to it, people are going to want to repair it. And so each of those components quite likely is going to be an item that's sold in its own right, as Dirk said, right? Part of the bill of materials, but also something that's in the taxonomy as well, in the enterprise taxonomy, as an item to be sold.
Okay, so the next one I hand over to you, Tom, again, and that's a great one because obviously in most cases, people don't start from scratch. There is an existing business. You had already done something taxonomy-wise, and it maybe turned out not to be ideal. So what are the best practices of sunsetting a legacy taxonomy and creating a new one? And obviously that has quite some impact on the enterprise.
Absolutely, it does. And if we're looking at sort of the enterprise taxonomy in the context of an informational taxonomy, right? Sort of how do I subdivide the various different categories of the things that I make or the things that I sell? Generally, if the data in the taxonomy is structured such that it's no longer allowing you to manage your business in the way that's efficient or the way that you'd like it to be, then there's a couple of different things you can do. I mean, one is to take the taxonomy that you have in place currently and modify it in place. The other option that you've got is to basically start from the ground up, and based on the lessons that have been learned from the existing taxonomy, right, to build something that more closely meets the requirements of the organization as it's evolved. And there you have the benefit now that your existing taxonomy that you're trying to sunset still has the collections of attributes for each category and it's very likely that you'll be able to take those and directly use all of those attributes in the new enterprise taxonomy that you're creating. All of the value lists for each of the attributes that you've got, I mean, that's all reusable information as well. And so they're very often, even though it seems like you're starting from zero, you're really not. You're building a new taxonomy, but it's being built on a foundation of knowledge that you have already gained. And most of the tools that are out there, at least in terms of product information management systems, allow you to have multiple taxonomies all applying to the same assortment of items simultaneously. And so that becomes then a question of at what point is the new taxonomy sufficiently well defined to be able to use that now to feed my website, to determine how I run my business, to feed the data warehouse, to determine how my products contribute to the overall profitability of the business. Hopefully that answered the question.
Hope that answers the question. I have another one, and then, well, we are probably have to come to an end at a certain point in the next couple of minutes, but I think that's another great question, and I will try to answer it. What are the high-level differences between PLM and PIM tools? Actually, first of all, one has to say there are some overlaps, right? The management of taxonomies, if you look at, and I don't want to name brand name, but there's a product pretty popular for PLM, which also has a cloud version, right? When it comes to how the taxonomies are being defined and how they're being managed, it's pretty similar like PIM. Right. Also, then how you manage attributions and so on. But a PLM software has one specific focus. It's well, it's engineering. So it's looking at how do I move a product through the life cycle, through the engineering life cycle, which means predominantly, well, my bill of material, of course, but also all of the collaterals and the drawings in particular. Right, and maybe simulation results and all what they exist, right? Whilst the PIM system is more a marketing solution. So you would manage marketing relevant information there, which allow you to market and sell your products. So which is not necessarily something you would find in a PLM system, like descriptions in multiple languages and media assets, pictures, and so on. And in particular, there is one particular focus on a PIM system, which is dealing with the ingestion and also the extraction or the distribution, the syndication of data into multiple channels. Right, that's where PIM systems are and particularly strong at. So in an ideal world, the PLM system and the PIM system, they play together. Right? So in a manufacturer scenario, PLM would typically feed PIM so that I don't have to manage my taxonomy and my attribution any longer, because for that, PLM is a leading system. Also, if I want to have some of the components, maybe I have some products which I sell as kits or something, I can also get that out of PLM, right? So that I can focus on what is relevant for sales and marketing, right? So both have their existence rights, so to say, and both play a particular role. And typically you find PLM in a manufacturer scenario, not so much distribution and retail, right? Hope that answers the question. Well, there was a last comment being made by Lars, and we will provide that as well. There is a free tool which allows you to build your own taxonomies and ontologies from Stanford University, right, which is pretty cool. Protégé from there. And I can also just tell you there, it's worth to, if you are in the electrical industry, maybe also to look at eTIM or eClass, also very valuable, and they have these taxonomies online there, and they perfectly demonstrate these kind of scenarios.
Yeah, to I guess answer that last question, right? I mean, why would I do this in PLM versus OWL? Well, I mean, generally, at the end of the day, right, when you've completed the exercise of building an enterprise taxonomy, the question you want to ask yourself is, how am I going to use that to do more business? And the tool set that is most often used for that, manufacturing is PLM, and then distribution and retail scenarios, it's more PIM systems, because that is where you gather together all of the information that you need to effectively market and sell your products to the world, and ultimately contribute to the bottom line. OWL basically gets you an ontology. You know, you can get a taxonomy from that. At the end of the day, that's what you have. You still don't have the tool set to be able to then integrate that into your business and allow that effort to become profitable.
Okay, yeah. There's a couple more coming, right? Mr. iPhone, would it be possible that you identify yourself? Because I have a question here. What benefits do you see of building a taxonomy and PIM?
Yeah, I think I just answered that one, in fact.
Yeah. Right. And I have another one here. Furthermore, I think it's important to mention the relationship between ontology, taxonomy, and choreography, especially with regards to data modeling.
We can touch on that a little bit. That's a little bit beyond the scope of what we were looking to talk about today. But I mean, ontology is actually a controlled vocabulary, right? It's you are defining the set of concepts and terms that you're using to talk about a particular knowledge area, right? A taxonomy is kind of a specialized instance of that, where we actually are looking at a hierarchy of things within that ontology. Choreography, I believe, is how these things all interact with each other. And while useful, particularly I've encountered that as I was working for some government organizations a few years ago. But in terms of the businesses that we seek to help, most of them don't need to get to that level of technical specialization in order to make the use of a taxonomy profitable.
Yeah, thank you very much. So in our allotted time, there are just 5 minutes left. So it's the last call. If you still have any questions, there are still a lot of people here, and I really thank you for staying so long with us. But if there are not any more questions, then again, I would thank you for participating here and asking so many questions, and it was a good conversation. Really loved it. Just wanted to mention, if you have specific questions, you can answer the gentlemen who are here on this call at any point in time. Just write us a LinkedIn note, or write an email, or go to our website, digitalconsultinghouse.com. Right. So, and I also would like to mention that we have some more upcoming events. So we were already talking a little bit about how we are making sure that our data has quality and is clean, right? But most people will start with dirty data. So the next webinar, and will be currently it's planned for March 16. Invitations are coming soon. Will be about how do I get my data clean once it's dirty, right? So we're talking about how do I do the data laundry operation, not money laundry, it's data laundry, just to have that very clear. Again, thank you very much for coming. I wish you a wonderful afternoon and a great weekend. And some of you will see soon. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.